Last month, New York socialist mayor announced through Instagram that he would be taxing the rich.
When I ran for mayor, I said I was going to tax the rich. Well, today, we're taxing the rich.
To many, his new pied-à-terre tax is quite uncontroversial because it only applies to multimillionaires who can afford a second home in New York City worth over $5 million.
Like for this penthouse, which hedge fund CEO Ken Griffin bought for $238 million.
Yet still, the announcement was met with condemnation from billionaires across America. Both for the method and how the tax was announced, Zohran Mamdani standing in front of a multi-billionaire's apartment.
I actually had to see it a second time because the first time I couldn't believe what I was watching.
But also for the ideology, the implication that billionaires don't contribute enough of their hard-earned cash to society. Ken Griffin himself, the billionaire mentioned in the video, was not happy.
What really upset me about the video was the fact that it put me in harm's way.
Jamie Dimon, the CEO of Chase Bank, wasn't either.
But a lot of people are paying billions of dollar taxes left. Why do you want that?
But possibly most notably, Jeff Bezos gave a long interview with CNBC detailing to the public why billionaires are not the problem.
You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens. I promise you. You can't connect those two things, not logically.
Unsurprisingly, this interview got a lot of talk on social media. Some praised Jeff Bezos for speaking the truth, but to others, it was just a sad attempt to distract the public from the growing conversations that wealth inequality is a huge issue and we're due a redistribution. Bezos specifically mentioned nurses in Queens earning $75,000 a year as being the most unfairly hit with taxes.
Why is a nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year paying more than $1,000 a month in taxes? They should be sending her an apology.
Now, I'm no nurse in Queens, but I am a young person who lives in Brooklyn, who works in New York City. I earn a very similar salary to the hypothetical nurse who Bezos describes. I own no assets. A lot of my wage is spent on rent. By all means, I slot very neatly into the demographic that Jeff Bezos says is deserving of an apology. So who should I listen to? My mayor, who tells me that billionaires are the problem, or the billionaires who tell me that I shouldn't be paying any taxes at all? Let's look into it. Alright, so I've got my laptop out, I've got Mamdani's announcement video up, I've got Jeff Bezos' interview, and I just want to go through the different sides of this story, see specifically exactly what each person's saying here. So let's start with Mamdani's announcement video.
When I ran for mayor, I said I was going to tax the rich. Well, today, we're taxing the rich. I'm thrilled to announce we've secured a pied-à-terre tax, the first in New York's history. This is an annual fee on luxury properties worth more than $5 million, whose owners do not live full-time in the city. This tax will raise at least $500 million directly for the city. It'll help fund things like free childcare, cleaner streets, and safer neighborhoods. As mayor, I believe everyone has a role to play in contributing to our city, and some a little bit more than others. Happy Tax Day, New York.
Alright, so there's a lot of politicking going on here, and whatever you think about Ken Griffin being called out specifically, standing in front of his apartment, I don't think it's that huge deal here. I don't really care. The main info here is that a pied-à-terre is a secondary home or residence, typically a condo or an apartment, owned by someone whose primary home is located elsewhere. So this tax specifically is only on apartments that are worth more than $5 million on people whose second home it is in the city. Let's see how many people this is going to affect. So, how many people own second homes worth over $5 million in New York City? This apparently will affect 13,000 residences. New York City has 3.7 million total housing units. Okay, so 13,000 out of 3.7 million, that's approximately 0.35%. So this tax will only affect the wealthiest 0.35% of people who aren't even primary residences in New York. I mean, personally, I have no problems with this policy. It kind of seems like a no-brainer. But let's see what Mr. Bezos, with a net worth of 273 billion, pretty comparable to the entire country of New Zealand, has to say on the matter.
I thought we should talk about, and maybe even start with, is these days it feels almost impossible to pick up a newspaper without reading a headline about wealth in America, about the billionaire class, about wealth inequality and policy and everything else. And it's taken a uniquely critical turn, I think. And I'm so curious, before we even get into everything else, what you think about that right now.
Is it a uniquely critical turn? Let's see. Is there a rising discussion on wealth inequality in America? It's at a record high. Wealth inequality in America just hit widest gap in 3 decades. Okay. What the hell is this? It's an ad for Amazon. What are the odds? The top 1% of households own 31.7% of all US wealth. All right. Is there a growing consensus to tax the rich? Most Americans continue to favor raising taxes on corporations' higher income households. 58% say tax rates on household incomes over $400,000 should be raised. Okay, so the uniquely critical turn is real.
Well, first of all, Andrew, I'm glad you're asking the question. I think it's a really important topic. And I think it's an important one to discuss because I see the same thing you do. You know, you see it in a bunch of headlines, you see it in a bunch of places. I have been thinking about, like, what is driving this? I think what's going on is that it's kind of a tale of two economies. So you have a bunch of people in this country who are doing really well, but you also have a bunch of people in this country who are struggling. Politicians are using the kind of age-old techniques, picking a villain and pointing fingers, but the problem is that doesn't solve anything. And so, like, if you want to help the group of people who are struggling, you have to figure out real root causes and solutions, and that takes skill. You know?
All right. I'm not gonna lie. It's been a couple of days. While I was filming this video, it got dark, and then I meant to film it the next day, but then I got busy with other things. So I've had a couple of days to really think about it and think about why this video and this Jeff Bezos interview rubbed so many people the wrong way. In the last few years, the inequalities in the American tax system have really become public knowledge, so much so that even multimillionaires are mentioning it in their TED Talks.
We need to eliminate the capital gains tax deduction. When did we decide that the money that capital earns is more noble than the money that sweat earns? Shouldn't it be flipped?
In California, they've just introduced a wealth tax that's specifically for billionaires. And if you're a centi-billionaire and you want some good PR, you just have to say you don't mind.
I also don't mind paying taxes. You know, I love this country.
There are so many articles and podcasts spelling out the issue, not with the top 1%, the top 0.001%, a handful of people. Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. The people whose wealth is tied up with stock in their companies, that they then take out loans against and pay completely different taxes than a very high-earning salaried employee. So while yes, the top 1% is paying a lot of society's taxes, a lot of that is corporate lawyers, investment bankers, extremely high-income earners. But proportionally, the centi-billionaires are getting off quite light.
We see this all the time whenever there are movements to impose more taxes on the wealthy. The stories start popping up. They all say, what are you talking about? The top 1% are already paying 40% of the income taxes.
We already have the most progressive tax system in the world. The top 1% of taxpayers pay 40% of all the tax revenue.
That statistic is referring to the top 1% of income earners, those with the most income, high income. However, when it comes to the wealthiest Americans, they are just as likely to be in the 40% of non-payers as they are in the top 1% of payers. And that's because under our current tax system, they are able to avoid taxes altogether by avoiding taxable income.
So when Jeff Bezos sat down with CNBC, people were hoping for a candid conversation where one of the richest men in the world addresses the system that's allowed him to accumulate almost $300 billion. But that's not what we got. What we got was one of the world's richest men pretending that he's on the same side as the nurses and the school teachers in Queens.
The bottom half pay only 3%. We have already, and I think it should be 0. I don't think it should be 3%. Right. I think it should be 0. So we'd be making it more progressive that way.
But there were times in this interview where he let his true motives slip in. He's not worried about the school teacher or the nurse in Queens. He's not worried about inefficiencies in city government. He's worried about the vilification of billionaires like himself. And in my opinion, that's pretty plain to see.
The fair share is, that's a policy debate. That's okay. But the vilification is the thing that's just the distraction.
Anyways, that's just my opinion. Although myself and Jeff Bezos differ on a lot of fronts, we do agree that It's important to have checks and balances and try and make governments run as efficiently as possible. I don't think the answer is as simple as bring in tons more tax revenue if that money isn't well spent. So that is important. But overall, I think that a system that allows a handful of people to accumulate hundreds of billions of dollars while taxing, as Jeff Bezos points out, working and middle class people quite highly is a problem. And I think it needs to be addressed. Thanks for watching.